Welcome to In the Courtroom and the Boardroom, Business Law and Litigation with Colleen McKnight.
Welcome back to In the Courtroom and the Boardroom with Miss Colleen McKnight. Colleen is a trial attorney and the founder of McKnight Law, where she represents founders, executives, and companies facing high-stakes disputes. I'm Evan Mack, and today we're talking about business divorce, what to do when co-founders or business partners can no longer work together, and how to protect the business in the process. This is business divorce, breaking up with a partner without burning down the business. Colleen, my dear, welcome back.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Let's talk about this divorce, this business divorce. What are some early warning signs that business partnerships can no longer work and heading toward that breakup or maybe that legal dispute?
I think it probably isn't that different from a regular divorce when you're looking at what is the health of your relationship? What are the health of the finances? What's the vision? Are you aligned on it? Right. And sometimes what we see is one partner has a very different vision for growth than the other, or is willing to take steps to get to that growth that the other isn't interested in or doesn't think is proper. Or one partner begins to kind of go rogue and bring other people in that the original partner isn't crazy about. And I'm using the word partner and want to qualify that these are not general partnerships usually. These are LLCs where it's really two people who are in it together, or even a corporation where they're in it together, but you really have two original founders. And sometimes, you've got one person's got the business know-how and one person has the tech side, and it really is a match made in heaven. But oftentimes we do see that just as any relationship, these can sour and people can go their separate ways. And so you really want to be on the lookout for, how are we doing? How are you doing? How is your family doing even? That's going to drive, are you committed to this? Are you distracted? And I've seen two people have fabulous business relationships until they're ready to be done. And I've seen other people where you watch it just explode like you're watching a train wreck.
Have you ever seen, because I knew somebody, I don't know if you ever seen this, I knew somebody that was married and they were business partners and then they got divorced, but they stayed business partners. Have you seen something like that before?
I have, and I really do applaud those people, right? I mean, my husband's also an attorney. It's his last name as well as mine on the firm. Mm-hmm. And we've thought about, would it make sense for you to come in? But it is tricky, right? You're crossing a lot of different boundaries, and you're adding a lot of complications when you're my business partner, my life partner, my co-parent. Right. And I think a lot of times when it's your spouse, that's your business partner, there's so much trust and there's so much established that sometimes it's harder to think through, how do we divide this business if we need to? For the same reason that most people don't want to mess with a prenup, right? It's just uncomfortable to think about the bad ending. But just as any other business partner, you need to have an exit plan for the business with your spouse. And so, if you're like, well, this is my husband, I trust him literally with my life. Right. You still want to have protections in place.
So what makes these disputes different from any other kind of business litigation, in your opinion?
Well, there's a couple of things. First of all, your business partner is a complete insider, right? They have access to all your documents. They have access to all your history. They know all the skeletons in the closets, right? This isn't just me against a third party, and I know where I keep the documents. I know what search terms would actually pull them up. I know how to kind of argue my way around something. Your business partner knows all of that information. They know what makes you tick and what pisses you off, right? And so that psychology piece comes into play in huge ways when you're talking about, I know how to throw this person off. I know how to manipulate them. I maybe know what's really going to get them excited about a settlement offer. You're really dealing with a different level of intimacy and knowledge. You're also dealing with somebody who has skin in the game in a different way, right? It's almost like a civil war in the sense that it's not you against a third party. It's your internal business against itself. Right. And sometimes the protections we put in place in your formation documents or your buy-sell agreement we're meant to protect both of you. And now one of you is going a different direction. And so it's harder sometimes to predict how we're going to deal with that dispute, or how can we set you up for success when we were trying to set you both up for success initially.
If one partner wants out or wants the other out, what are the first legal and financial questions that need to be answered if this is how things are going?
Yeah. And I know I sound like a broken record, Evan, when we go back to your contracts,
Right.
your contracts, right? So your formation document, let's say it's an LLC, so your membership agreement, that agreement should dictate the ability and the process for one party to get out. And it is so important, right? For me, right now, I am a single member managed LLC. There's nobody else who makes decisions. But if I were to take on a partner who is also managing this with me, it is really critical that we think through, what if I die? Does this person want to be in business with my husband because he's my heir? What if I, go bankrupt? Do I take them down with me? How do we value the business in the case that one of us decides, hey, I just can't afford this anymore, or I've had an emergency in my family, I need to turn my attention to them, I want to be bought out? Well, that agreement, that buy-sell agreement within your formation document is the key provision that's going to help you determine, that should have been determined ahead of time, how do we value the business? And there's a myriad of ways to do that. There are financial experts whose entire business is this process. And depending on your business, how your revenue is created, what you're doing with that revenue, you may want a specific way of valuing the business. And a lot of times there's tax implications, right? I think it was very famous. The Estee Lauder family had a buy-sell provision that valued their business so low that the IRS came in and said, we're not going to accept your valuation of this multi-billion-dollar business that says it's worth very, very little, because we want more taxes from you than that. Right? And so that buy-sell provision isn't just, hey, you and I have decided to go our separate ways. What's my half worth? But it's also, how is that half taxable? What is it? Am I getting stocks? Am I getting cash? Do I need to stick around and have a share of the profits moving forward? And so when you're preparing these formation documents, I often say, you don't want to think about divorce when you're getting married, but the paperwork is for the divorce. And when you're gung-ho and you have a beautiful vision and you can see the market is open for you and you just want to hit the road, you still need to pause and figure out, what is this going to be? I have a good friend who went into business with his father-in-law. Wow. And we talked about this process when they were putting their contracts together. And he said, it became a business document, right? A wills and trusts document, a potential divorce document, because it was his father-in-law, right? Like, the amount of time and effort that they had to spend on that piece of it was really large, because it had all these implications of all these different life eventualities that they needed to take into consideration. And so you want to make sure that that buy-sell is there. You also want to make sure that one of you can't go and change the buy-sell without the other's approval, right? So how that formation document is set up so that who needs approval to change it? Can one of you do it? Who has a majority of rights? Those things can ultimately, if your business partner is angry at you and they have power, they could go say, okay, here's how it's going to work. And you end up with 10% of the value.
What happens when there's no clear exit provision or if the owners are in a deadlock?
Litigation. Litigation is what happens in that instance. You go get an expert that says, this is what is fair for me. I go get an expert, say, this is what's fair for me. We take it to the court and a judge or a jury decides. And let me tell you, that process is long. It is painful. It is expensive. And you would much rather have gotten ahead of it in your formation documents than let somebody else decide on the back end.
But are there smart ways to resolve these disputes without blowing up, the business entirely, without going into that litigation? Just maybe something more amicable.
Yeah. So you can always take it to a mediation. It's interesting because sometimes it really is a situation of, my child is sick and I need to step away from this business and I just want to be treated fairly. And you and I have a good relationship and we're willing to work that out. But oftentimes when you're talking about a business divorce, it is ugly. People are no longer friendly. They're no longer on the right terms. It is war. And so you can put in those formation documents or in other agreements, we agree to mediate this. It'll be a binding mediation. It will be before a mediator we both agree on, and they can divide this up. I personally have not seen that work very well because either you're in a good spot and you can come to an agreement, or you're not willing to sit down and talk friendly with a mediator. But you know yourself and your business partner better than anyone else does. And having good counsel who can guide you through, here's how we protect future you should things go bad. Let me think about the divorce while you're busy in your honeymoon.
How do you help clients navigate this emotional tension while they're still trying to make these smart legal decisions that can, that's going to dictate their future?
Yeah, so you want to get ahead of it as much as you can. And if you haven't gotten ahead of it, using that psychological piece of, I know who this person is, I know what matters to them, right? Their ego needs to be stroked here, or they just need to see a bigger number there. So how do we move the figures around so that they feel like they're getting more liquid or more equity? Really talking with the clients through, here's your business baby, right? Are you willing to sacrifice this on the altar of your ego? Or do you want the business to survive even if you're not part of it? And sometimes the answer to that first question is yes, sacrifice the baby. If I can't have it, no one can have it. And sometimes it is, okay, I just need a fair split, but then we need to look at future contracts, at non-competes, at dividing territory so that I can continue in the part that matters to me and you continue in the part that matters to you. And we understand clearly where those boundaries are drawn, right? And sometimes you're dealing with somebody who maybe you got into bed with because they had the dollars or they had the know-how, but you kind of always knew they were a little bit off or unpredictable. And in that case, I really implore business owners, make sure that you have the right paperwork in place. Make sure that you know what your rights are on the front end. And once you get there, coming to someone like me who can say, I've been down this road. Here's what we're going to do with your facts. Here's what we're going to do. Here's our strategy. It's incredibly frustrating. I remember several months ago, my daughter caught the flu and I'm calling the doctor on, teledoc or whatever the video doctor is. And he says, it really would have been better if you'd gotten the flu shot. Well, it's a little too late for that.
Still a little too late, man. She got the flu.
Right? Like that's not helpful to me right now. And so, this message is not for the business owner that's already in a business divorce. I understand you can't get ahead of it. Once you're in it, get good counsel, kind of circle the wagons, understand where the value lies in the company, understand what your options are, and also really think through the profile of your business partner. Sometimes you really can come to a compromise where everybody gets what really matters to them. And if you're being petty or your partner is being petty and they just want the thing that matters to you to hurt you, we should know that too, so that we can figure out a way to change the stakes there and use strategy for you and against them.
But we talked about certain things that were contentious and how aggressive things can be. But do you have a case or any thought in mind as when things were handled well and then the business continued and everything was great and it was roses and daisies?
Yeah, sometimes just selling out to a third party and saying, we're going to let this business be taken by private equity or be absorbed by a competitor. And we both just walk away with money and we go do whatever we want on the other end. Sometimes what I see is people who I have a case right now where an early investor in a company just didn't like that he wasn't getting a return fast enough.
Okay.
Right. And so he's suing the company, dragging it into the ground, ruining the value that would come to him if the company had continued to make revenue. And so I think people just aren't always rational. And that makes us a little bit crazy, right? Because why, especially in business, why wouldn't you be rational? But when you're talking about business owners and two people who built something together, it gets really personal. It gets really personal really quickly. And so, it's sometimes hard to predict what someone's going to do. And I think the family law attorneys would say the same when you're talking about a regular divorce. And that's why we call it a business divorce. It's remarkably similar. I have one case right now with somebody who was a consultant between two business owners. They had the most contentious breakup I've seen in a long time. And this poor person is caught between them where they're saying, I don't owe her the money, you owe her the money.
Wow.
Oh, I paid my half, you owe your half. And she's being drugged through court as a pawn in their divorce, right? And so the way you behave and the way that you value it, your companies and the way that you've set this up, it's not just going to affect you. It's also going to affect the people that work with you. It's going to affect your vendors, your consultants, right? And I love to fight, but I wouldn't want to be a party to a business divorce. It just sounds so hard and emotionally draining and terrible. And so, to the extent you can, choose wisely who your business partners are going to be, just like you would choose wisely who your spouse is going to be. Keep the tab on the emotional health of that relationship, the financial health, how the documents are drafted, who can change them. And then, be ready to defend yourself should somebody go off the rails.
Ms. Colleen, what advice would you give though to founders who are still in that honeymoon phase, that initial phase, and everything's hunky dory? What should they be putting in place to avoid disaster later? Is it that paperwork? Is it communication? What would you say to them?
Yes, both of those things, right? Like, let's get the paperwork squared away so that you both feel good about where you stand, what your rights would be. How is this going to go should it all fall apart? Having really good communication is also so important. And knowing what would happen if I die. Do you want to be in business with my husband? I think he's amazing. But you may not want to be in business with him, and he may be an emotional wreck after I die. And so how do you make sure he and my heirs get the value that they should get from what I built? But that you're not stuck trying to run a business with somebody who maybe doesn't have the same interest, expertise, rationality, or thought processes, right? Make sure that your oral agreements get recorded. If you come to an agreement in a meeting, take minutes or send an email and say, hey, we agreed today to X, Y, and Z. Can you confirm? Right? Because in the heat of the moment of running a business and making sure that things are going as they should, you don't always stop to think, well, did I get that recorded? And you want to make sure that those things are recorded so that if you need to divide the business later, you know where everybody stood.
Ms. Colleen, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much.
And thank you all for listening to In the Courtroom and the Boardroom with Ms. Colleen McKnight. If you're facing a business partnership that's no longer working or want to plan ahead to protect your company from eternal breakdowns, Colleen can help. Visit McKnightLaw.us to learn more. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a review so you do not miss this next episode.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.